Welcome to Neighborhoods. I'm Tom Ritchie. Today we're going to be discussing buying and selling and a little bit of staging. And there's so many decisions to be making today that we really need a realtor's advice. And we have a great one joining us, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Neighborhoods. Today I'm joined by Mark Burke of Royal LePage Tri-Land here in Woodstock. A great realtor, and he's going to answer a lot of our questions that we're going to have today. Mark, thanks for joining Neighborhoods.
My pleasure.
So Mark's been in the business, as I said, a long time. Exactly how long?
10 years, 40 pounds, and half a head of gray hair.
The gray hair is synonymous with real estate, though, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Late nights.
So Mark, there's a lot of options today when it comes to buying a house. We've got condos, freehold condos, single family. How do you direct a client or a buyer when it comes to that?
I think the most important thing for folks to remember is to think about how it's going to live. You know, a lot of times when we're shopping for homes or anything, we like to think about how it looks and how it attracts us. But at the same time, I think it's most important that we really zero in on how you're going to interact with it, how you're going to live. Condos, for example, do you like to cut grass, shovel snow, bigger yards, smaller yards, privacy, children, pets, all of those things that are part of our lives. You have to really think about how you're going to live in that home.
Right. Can you help me find a house, guys? These are all questions that I should know when I'm looking, and I am looking, but finding one is a little more difficult. So why a realtor? Why should someone choose a realtor? There's a lot of options out there. There's, for the for sale by owners, but what I've found is that buyers don't necessarily, it's not that someone can't sell their house by themselves, it's that it really limits the pool of buyers because buyers are uncertain and they don't want to necessarily purchase privately. So how do they decide?
I've recently gone through looking for a home myself.
Right.
And I got to tell you, it was, as a realtor, it was a difficult experience. So I think sometimes the number of choices, the amount of information, the number of decisions that you have to make within the decision, the process, all of that, it's a little bit overwhelming.
Right.
And I think to myself, as a realtor, I found it overwhelming. How does the average person who doesn't deal with this on a daily basis, how do they deal with that? So, tapping into the experience that somebody would have, hundreds of deals, hundreds of negotiations, different issues with homes. We talk about, wind turbines is a hot topic these days. There's lots of things that, that we spend our days, focusing on. This is what we do.
Right.
And that lets people just focus on the things that they need to focus on. What's right for them? What's the right decision? And help us to manage all of the other process that can be a little bit overwhelming.
Right. And obviously we don't discriminate against people that want to sell their home by themselves. It's not something that we do. So, you touched on some of the advantages of working with a realtor. What can they expect? Number one, first, how do they find a realtor?
Lots of people shop for realtors in a different way. Sometimes they're shopping for a realtor while they're shopping for a house. They'll call up the listing realtor to go look at a particular home, and that's a chance to meet somebody. They'll meet realtors at open houses. We find most commonly, though, people are meeting realtors through past experience, through friends and family, through a referral position. So it's really, I think the most important thing is to find somebody that you trust. It's a very intimate process. You spend a lot of time together.
Right.
And it's very close. It's something that's very important in your life. So if you find somebody that you trust, I think that'll help the process go a lot more smoothly for the average person.
Right, yep. And so a potential buyer meets up with a realtor, they decide they want to work together. What is the process they can expect when looking for a house?
There's let's say two normal steps. I mean, first is the shopping process, which is a lot of fun. You get to go look at things. We get to drive around in the convertibles looking at big, beautiful mansions. But just regular people looking at houses and not having to carry bags, which is kind of nice. So that's kind of the first step of the process is finding the home. So part of that is looking at the homes that are available in the open marketplace. So realtor.ca being a great place to start for that.
Yep.
But also there are a lot of homes that aren't necessarily on the open market that a realtor can help you tap into.
Right.
And so that's a very exciting piece of the marketplace. The next step from there is that once you find that right house is how do we go into that negotiation, offer, agreement, conditions, home inspections, all of those things. And I like to let people just not worry about that. Focus on the things that they need to focus on, which is finding the right house, and let a realtor help you with all of those other steps along the way.
Right, right. Now, do you find that a lot of the buyers are coming forward and they basically give you a list of property they want to see? And in my experience, what I found is, here's 30 houses we need to see. So how do you, as a realtor, help them narrow that list down? Because it can become confusing, and they end up in too many houses, and then they can't make a decision. So how do you help them narrow that list down?
Well, one of the most interesting experiences is when a buyer tells you, gives you the very definitive list,
Right.
Here are my needs and wants. Here are the houses that I want to go see. And then you start to go see them. And what actually happens is the evolution of somebody who says, okay, I want a really big property.
Yeah.
And they end up in a really small property. And then they apologize to you. I know I said I wanted a big property.
Yeah.
But I think that the interesting thing is part of that shopping process is really challenging your own assumptions of what you want and what your priorities are. So for most people, when you're shopping, we don't have an unlimited budget. You know, if they had $1 million, they could find everything that they
Right.
want. But usually there's some compromise that happens along the way. So what happens is they usually have the opportunity of reorganizing their needs and wants
Sure.
within their budget. So part of that is the process, and I think that what most people may not realize is that while we're shopping for homes, we're spending that time in the car, we're spending that time in the house, having that discussion, and really starting to better understand their needs,
Right.
and to be able to focus them and channel them into the homes that make a lot more sense.
Right. So someone comes to you, they say, or they figure, I think I want a $500,000 house. What do you do? Do you say, well, have you been to a mortgage broker? What is that process like?
Yeah, the pre-approval process is, I mean, it's just one of those key things that you have to do right up front. Last thing you want to do is to get into a house that you like, that you love, and then realize that you have, not necessarily that you can't afford it, but you have some kind of impediment.
Right.
People move for lots of reasons. People have lots of financial impediments, for example, that they wouldn't even know about. Maybe a blemish on their credit that isn't even theirs.
Right.
I actually had a client one time that was buying a home that had 3 credit profiles.
Wow.
One of them that was empty. So they went from having a pre-approval to not being approved, and yet it was really just a simple clerical error.
Sure.
Nice to get that stuff out of the way so
Yeah.
that you can really just focus again on
Yeah.
finding the right house. And then when you get into that offer process, you don't have any impediments
Right.
that are going to
The big
slow
surprise,
things down.
right? I mean, that's one of the things that we try to avoid the most we can is a huge surprise. So what Mark is basically saying, you get into an offer process, you get out there, you put an offer in on a house, and then all of a sudden you find out you cannot afford it, maybe not even be able to qualify for a mortgage, and that's where that pre-approval will come in handy, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. And so obviously you're going to take, as a realtor, you're going to take care of all the documentation. You're going to take care of the offer, you're going to take care of the notices of fulfillment, and these are things that you may or may not know, but the realtor takes care of that. And then what do you do with that? You've got an offer accepted, what happens with it?
The one thing that people sometimes think is that the lawyer is the one that's really involved in
Right.
that paperwork process.
Right.
And we're really the ones that take care of all of that. We have extensive training in that piece of the legal field that relates to real estate. There is that next phase of where it goes from us into the closing process. So
Sure.
there's this excitement of shopping, there's this excitement of the negotiation and agreement, and then there's this pause. I got to wait 60 days.
Yeah.
You know, when do I get to actually move in?
Right.
You know, in that time period, there's a lot of steps that have to happen, whether it's just the simple stuff of packing and setting up utilities and whatnot, but then transferring it over into the legal side of it where they actually fulfill that agreement.
Right.
So really, our kind of, we're the steward, we're the quarterback, so to speak, of
Right.
making sure that that everything that is in the agreement gets executed, which is important from both the buyer and the seller perspective, what they need to do, and to connect that with the experts at the other end from the legal side to make sure that it gets completed.
Okay, so obviously this is a very condensed version of buying. I wish we had an hour, but we technically don't. Producers yell at me if I go over the 30 minutes allowed. So what we're going to do is when we come back, we're going to start discussing selling with the clients and neighbors and all the people out there that are waiting to buy and sell. So stay tuned to Neighborhoods. We'll be right back.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Neighborhoods, but I do invite you to check out our Facebook page where you can get information on past and future episodes. But not only that, you could win some great prizes from our sponsors like the Woodstock Fitness and Racket Club. Stay tuned right here on Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Neighborhoods. I'm Tom Ritchie, and I'm joined today by Mark Burke of Royal LePage Triland Realty here in Woodstock.
Yep.
Did I get all that in?
You did.
Okay. It's tough to get it all in. It's a long brokerage.
Absolutely.
Okay. So before the break, we were discussing buying, and now we're going to switch over to selling. Mark, selling. Okay. Tell me, how is a price determined? How are we coming up with these prices?
I mean, it's really simple. The buyers are the ones in the marketplace that determine prices. So they always have choices, right? So there's never just one house for sale. And so what happens is in the open marketplace, buyers are going to look at all their different choices and decide which one is the right one for them. So ultimately, it's the buyer, it's the marketplace that determines price. Our job as a realtor and as a homeowner is to decide, without having that buyer in front of us in the beginning, how can we discern what the intrinsic value of the home actually is?
Right.
So what we do is we go back and we look at historical sales and say that, you know, the exact same house as yours down the street sold 2 months ago for this price. So we can start to kind of zero in and use that as evidence to say what we would expect from their home.
Right. So you're talking about a CMA or a comparative market analysis, basically. So it's not a crystal ball. Everyone thinks that realtors have a crystal ball and we just throw a price out. And usually what I'll say is that you know, it's not always the client or the seller setting the price, but in some cases it is, correct?
I mean, ultimately, the homeowner decides where they want to start with their asking price. I don't think I've ever met anybody that thinks their house is worth less than
There's
what
not
it
many
is.
out there, right?
Very common. That's the only thing in the crystal ball that we can look at and say is that when we meet with somebody and we work through the pricing and we say, you know, it's going to sell in this range. And they say, well, I think it's a little bit higher. I'm like, great. Because that really means that we're probably pretty close. It's very normal for a homeowner, including myself as a homeowner, to value our home because we like all of the things that we like.
Right.
But we forget about all the things that maybe that somebody won't like or things that do need to be repaired. So, so it's ultimately the buyer that makes that decision, but the homeowner decides where to start the process.
Okay. And how do you go about marketing a property these days? There's a plethora of ways to do it. Internet, I'm sure, has changed the game a lot.
Electronic marketing is exciting because it really does give the buyer great insight into the home very quickly.
Right.
You know, buyers' expectations, and this is not just with real estate, with all marketing elements right now, they have an expectation of a lot of information in a very short period of time. They're voracious with information. Buyers are very educated with respect to what is available in the marketplace. It's the #1 focus that they have. So the electronic means that we have gives them a couple things. Number one, it gets them inside the home sooner. They're able to look at photos. Gone are the days where you had the brokerage on the main street with a Polaroid up in the window. Buyers are demanding more and more information, and the electronic means that we have between photos and video really give us the ability to deliver that efficiently to them, so they can zero in on the homes that make sense for them.
Okay, so I'm going to allow you one answer. What's the #1 reason a house won't sell?
Price.
There it is, price.
Yeah.
Right? So, but it's not necessarily the realtor or the client's fault. It's markets change, right?
The exciting thing about the marketplace right now is it's very efficient. So, you know, let me pause for a second and go back. Look at the world crisis, the fall of 2008 through most of 2009. You could take a great house, you could price it right, and it still wouldn't sell. Right. And there was nothing wrong, and nobody did anything wrong. There was just some inefficiency in the marketplace that people weren't moving. The marketplace right now is very healthy. A good house that is priced right and marketed well will sell. Will sell in a very reasonable, we're talking 30, 60-day period of time. Really when it comes down to it, if you've done all of those steps right, and as a realtor, that's what we look at. If we've eliminated any issues with the home, if we've marketed and exposed it to the buyers, and it's still not selling, ultimately it's probably going to be a price issue.
Which is a tough pill to swallow sometimes, that there has to be a reduction, but
I think that most homeowners recognize that, you know, we all want the top dollar for our house, But in a sense, if we recognize that we're getting top dollar, even if that number is below what we were hoping for,
Sure.
as long as we know that we're getting what we deserve,
Right,
I think most people can reconcile with that.
Perfect. Okay. So we're going to go to break, and when we get back, we're going to discuss staging, decorating, that sort of thing. We're going to be joined by Paula Schaus, and we're just going to go over some of the tips and hints that you can do to make your house sell better. Welcome back to Neighborhoods. So before the break, I had mentioned to you, Mark, that we were going to be joined by Paula Schaus. Paula, thanks so much for joining Neighborhoods.
You're welcome.
So now we're going to discuss staging. We're going to talk about the advantages of staging and how that can help assist in the sale of a house. Okay. So first, tell us about your company.
I started my company about 12 months ago.
Okay.
Called PS Interiors. Before that, I managed a store in Ingersoll, then the Benjamin Moore store, Schaus Decorating Center, and I managed that for 14 years. Before that, I also worked at the Woodstock location for 13 years.
Right.
So I have been in the industry, I have been in the design industry for quite some time. But 12 months ago, I decided that I wanted to take my knowledge and make it larger, do something bigger with it.
Right.
So I decided to create PS Interiors.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, I mean, everyone should know what staging is nowadays, correct? I mean, do you still get people that go, what is staging?
yeah, you'd be surprised when people do not know what home staging is.
Yeah, like you're pulling in a stagecoach or something like that. Like
Right.
You just don't really know what's going on, right?
Yeah. You would think we've been bombarded by all the home decorating shows that everybody you would assume they would know what home staging is. However, when people come to me, or a real estate agent most typically will come to me and say, I have a client, they need to do some stuff with their house, home staging, and the client doesn't really understand why I need to be involved.
Right.
So they don't know what home staging is. It's nice to get the knowledge out to real estate agents and to their customers to really tell them what the importance of home staging really is, because I really do believe, and I think a lot of real estates do agree with me, that home staging your house really does make a major impact in selling the house.
Sure. Well, let's ask, we've got Mark here. Mark, what is your take on staging?
Staging absolutely works. There's just no question about it. Buyers, in a sense, and it's very natural, they can't see the finished product with either a vacant home is a great example, or to take another home that's already, let's say, a decent home, but to prepare it to show. We prepare everything that we do to showcase to clients. You don't go into Walmart and they just have a bunch of stuff laying around. We showcase everything, we merchandise everything. So really, to look at staging would to take the retail world and say all we're doing in the home is that we're getting it ready for presentation. And that just makes sense. And that goes from everything from full furnishing right through to just some finished decor. So definitely adds value, there's no doubt about it.
Right, and there's obviously varying degrees of staging, correct?
Yeah.
So anything from what?
It could be just simply as decluttering is very important, cleaning your house.
Right.
You could go into a little bit more renovating and repainting the house, taking away some very bold colors, painting them very neutral. That does obviously add a little bit of cost, but in the whole scheme of things, it's really inexpensive.
Right.
You could go a little bit further. You could add some finishing touches, like some more artwork. You could go and change your countertop. You can paint your kitchen cupboards. I wouldn't recommend going into a whole lot of new furnishings. I would recommend using the furnishings you have, but
Okay.
less,
Right.
because less is more.
Okay, so not to cut you off, but a perfect example we have, you sent us a before and after. You're talking about decluttering, maybe moving some stuff around. So on the first picture, we have a beautiful home. It looks like a beautiful home, but there's just a lot of, what's the way to put it? Let's just say living. There's a lot of living going on in this house, okay? So what is it that you had to do on this project?
Well, this one right here, as you can see, is they're using this area as the kitchen, the cleaning. They have children, so there's a lot of room in this area for their children to play. They, blankets to kind of cozy up, storage space.
Right.
But a homeowner doesn't want to walk into a house and see how you live with your family or
Right.
how you live with your pets. They want to walk into a house and see how they could live in the house. They don't care about your
Right.
lifestyle.
Sure.
They want to see how they can walk in and turn that into their own house.
Okay.
So what I would recommend in this particular, what I have recommended is to get rid of all the storage.
Okay, now we have an after.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the after. Declutter everything. Take everything off the kitchen counter. Make the area appear that they have a lot of space to cook. That this is a place that they can come in, they can kick back, entertain, and cook into this area.
Now, this is a night and day difference, but it's not, you didn't go to an extreme. You didn't repaint a bunch of walls, you didn't do that sort of thing.
Not in this particular case, no.
You basically made it a house again,
Right.
right? Not a, this is a home, the first one's a home, this becomes a house, right?
You have to depersonalize your
Right.
house.
Okay.
And that's really hard for, I think, homeowners and sellers to do. They think this is my house, I want it to look cozy.
Right.
But you have to really depersonalize
Okay,
it.
and what are your thoughts on family photos? Mark, you can add in on this as well.
Again, it goes back to the depersonalize. I think a little, some artwork or some photos on the walls.
Right.
I think are okay. I think when you start getting into a coffee table with rows and rows and rows of family pictures, again, that's the declutter issue. They want to see where they can hang their family photos,
Sure.
not yours again. I know
Right.
I'm repeating myself, but
Yeah.
I think it's really important to depersonalize, declutter, clean the area, get rid of all the odors.
Yeah. Mark, what do you say to clients that have a wall of family photos?
It's about balance. I would say that buyers are interested in some ways of knowing that it is a home, that there's happiness, because that's really what they want to buy. They're trying to buy some space for their family to have
Right.
a good life. So there needs to be some balance. You don't want your glamour shot of yourself in the background because that just doesn't work. But holiday photos, or sometimes you'll see a staircase going down the stairs. There'll be some photos going
Sure.
down. I think it's about balance.
Okay.
Minimal.
Okay. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to look at one more before and after, because this one intrigued me when you sent it to me, and I looked at it and I thought, well, there's not a big change, but it's a very noticeable change. Okay. So
Right.
in the first one, what are we
Yes.
looking at?
First one right here is just a little patio space, very obvious. A deck somewhere you can sit and have a cup of coffee. Maybe put a barbecue on, but it's not inviting. People are, especially in a lot of houses now, there's not a lot of property, so people want yards
Right.
still. So that's why they're buying the single dwelling houses.
Sure.
So the next one right here, the after picture, as you can see, we simply added a little bistro table, 2 chairs, an umbrella, added some flowers, not a large cost, but when people walk out that door, they can envision themselves sitting there relaxing,
Right.
rather than
It does
just
look
sitting.
inviting.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should have the show here on this patio, and instead of in the hot lights of the studio.
Yeah.
Anyways, Paula, Mark, thanks so much for joining us. We do have to cut to break, but it's been great having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
We'll be right back with more Neighborhoods. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for this episode of Neighborhoods, but I'd like to thank Paula Schaus of PS Interiors and Mark Burke of Royal LePage Tri-Land in Woodstock. Got that all in?
You got it.
Got it all in. If you'd like to get in contact with Paula or Mark, Paula's psinteriors.ca, Mark Burke, burkett.ca. Okay. As always, you can contact me. My number's on the screen. Feel free to shoot me a text. If you have any questions about this episode or a suggestion about a further episode, feel free to contact me. Thanks for joining Neighborhoods. We'll see you next week. Would you like to be a guest on Neighborhoods? We're looking for people who have bought, sold, or tried selling their house privately. Feel free to contact us.